Seth Moulton is a former Green Beret. He's a congressman from Massachusetts running for U.S. Senate. And he had this to say about Pete Hegseth. It's remarkable, actually, on CNN over the weekend.
Do you believe that the Secretary of Defense is guilty of war crimes?
Absolutely. I mean, he's clearly behind the operation to shoot all these boats in the Caribbean when it's very unclear that we actually have any confirmation that these so-called narco-terrorists, a term the administration invented to justify this action, are even on the boats. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of evidence that these are just fishermen, getting jobs, piloting these boats, trying to feed their families. There's been press reporting on some of these individuals who've been killed who are clearly not war criminals. And on top of that, we then have the strike where they came back and hit it again, a double tap, just purely to kill these survivors who were clinging to wreckage. It's interesting, Aaron, another historical analogy. Back in World War II, the Allies tried Nazi submarine captains for doing this exact same thing. And guess what the conclusion was? They got executed. Listen to that, Mr. Secretary.
Jakub Grygiel is a professor of politics at the Catholic University of America and a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us now. Jakub, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
I'll let you react to what Seth Moulton had to say, so I don't have to.
Well, this is the first time I hear it, but the legal aspect of that, I think it's not as clear as the congressman put it. Narco trafficking is an enormous problem for us, for the U.S., and I think the administration is on the right path to try to limit the drugs that come into the U.S., which are killing Americans, and in that sense, it is an act of war. These drugs are not making us pretty or making us thin; they're killing us. And so, whether you do it through drugs or through guns, you're assaulting the American nation and American sovereignty. So, I think eliminating the flow of drugs, I think it's a national security problem, and it's a national security strategy that should be praised.
Yeah, but comparing Pete Hegseth to a German U-boat captain may be just a bit of a stretch. I know if a leftist talks about the Trump administration for more than 45 seconds, a Hitler metaphor will be offered. Right. But in terms of fishermen just looking for jobs to feed their family, I mean, if you decide to take a job with a drug cartel, then there are perils associated with that. This just in.
No, absolutely. I mean, most criminals want the money for a variety of reasons, but they're still criminals. And so we shouldn't just be treating them nicely just because they say they need the money. And I think the accusations like this one, but also accusations against the administration, for instance, related to the war in Iran or to the negotiations with Russia, tend to be very damaging, not just to the domestic political debate, but actually to our national security and U.S. foreign policy, because our enemies see us quite divided and work on that. So accusing Trump, for instance, of being pro-Putin just because he wants to end the war between Russia and Ukraine through negotiations, it's not working out so far. Or accusing Trump of, again, violating some international law for bombing Iran starting at the end of February. I think it's quite damaging, and it's counterproductive to American national security. Usually, we always said that the internal divisions, stopped at water's edge, right? We didn't. Once we're dealing with the national security issues, we tended to be united, and I think that unity is lacking, and I think it's again counterproductive for congressmen or other politicians, especially in this case from the left, to accuse the administration of crimes and massive violations of some international law. I think it's just it's not true, and two, it's damaging to our national security to convey these divisions.
Yeah, imagine the left violating norms. That's also real surprising. Your piece at Civitas Institute about the coming global struggle and the preemptive retaliatory de-escalation campaign in Iran. I just love military jargon. One of the things you write is there is a growing sense in the U.S. that order and stability are not always in our best interest. Can you explain that observation?
Well, it's very simple. The idea, the criticism that often is leveled against the administration in this case, in the war in Iran, is that the status quo was fine. We could just negotiate with Iran and see what happens. And on the contrary, the criticism said that the attacking Iran was really sort of rocking the boat, was creating a lot of instability. I think it's the opposite, namely that the status quo was incredibly dangerous. And nuclear Iran, which at some point we have to assume it would have been a nuclear Iran, would have been absolutely damaging to our national security. Not just because we care about the Middle East, which, to be honest, we probably don't as much as we did 20, 30 years ago, but because it's one of the many problems that we face. We face Russia, we face China in particular, and then suddenly we have a nuclear Iran that for 40 years, has been saying death to America. Death to Israel is a secondary thing that they say. Really, they want to kill America. And they killed a lot of Americans so far. So entering into a military operations against Iran, I think, is incredibly risky, as we've seen. You never know what happens. Once you start a war, you never know where it goes. But I think it was the right thing to do. Chaos, well, it's not chaos. It's instability. And that's my second point here is instability is not always dangerous to everybody involved, or vice versa. Order is not always beneficial to everybody involved. To give you an example, we really care that Mexico is stable. If Mexico is unstable, we have problems in Texas, Arizona, California, and the rest of the U.S. We don't care if Central Asia is stable. That's a problem for Russia or China and others. I think that's the case in the Strait of Hormuz, which is, again, in the front pages today. Instability there is risky. It's somewhat costly, but it's much more dangerous to others than us, China, Europe, most of the Asian countries. We don't need that oil as much as we did in the 1990s. So there's just a difference in value or a relative value of the stability or instability in a particular region.
Right. I mean, and to bring that analysis to the Western Hemisphere, a little bit of instability in Venezuela, for example, is turning out to be a positive development. A little bit of instability in Cuba could turn out similarly with not exactly regime change, but certainly an attitudinal change with, for example, the regime in Caracas, such that you have U.S. oil companies now talking about making investments in that area that they weren't talking about 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And here's, I think, something I think is positive of this administration is that they're willing to take risks that even in the previous round, the first Trump administration was not willing to do. And certainly the Biden administration and the other administrations in the last decades, we were always very risk averse, right? We didn't want to do too many things, and particularly after the disaster in Afghanistan and Iraq, we decided, well, it's not worth it. Let's just not do much, because not doing things was beneficial. It's not risky. I think the administration decided, no, taking some risk is worthwhile, and it may lead to beneficial outcomes. And your point about Venezuela is a great example, although I think the problem there is that, I don't know if it's a problem, but the risk there is that it was a very well-run operation, very small, very targeted, just removing Maduro and his wife, and very successful. I'm not sure that's necessarily easy to repeat everywhere, right? So I'm not sure that Cuba may be exactly the same case, et cetera. But again, so far, you're right. I think the outcome of that is beneficial, and it creates actually stability in the Western Hemisphere.
Yesterday, the Iranians broke the ceasefire by attempting to fire on U.S. ships, as well as hitting a refinery in UAE. So now President Trump faces a decision, and he's saber-rattling, threatening the Iranians. But is it time, as some have suggested, to resume knocking out the targets that have already been identified but not yet knocked out, to escalate the de-escalation, if you will?
My sense is that sooner or later that will happen. I don't know if it's going to happen tonight or in a week or in a month. Obviously, the negotiations that have been sort of on and off with the Iranians are not going anywhere. The divergence of interest is just too big. And so sooner or later, it's clearly that we have to finish the military operations. And by that, meaning we have to continue devastating their military capabilities and hope that some revolutionary change happens in Iran itself, whether it's a full-out regime change or a change in attitude or a change in leadership. So I think that's coming. I would just remind people always that this has been going on just for 2 months. I think we're at 60-some day, 2 months and a week. It's fairly short. The war between Russia and Ukraine has lasted so far 4 years. Not counting since 2014, but the last episode, so the big episode, is 4 years long. And there's still no resolution to that war. So 2 months is actually very, very short to expect something dramatic, a big dramatic change. So I think the pause that is happening right now, the ceasefire, if you want to call it, but it's more a pause, I think it's beneficial. It's worthwhile to restock our ammunition, to refuel our planes, and see whether there's some possibility of negotiations. Obviously, that's not happening. Iran is pointing out in that direction by attacking UAE yesterday. And so the military operations will resume at some point, I think fairly soon.
Jakub Grygiel, professor of politics at Catholic University of America, visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. Jakub, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And Jakub joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Are you concerned about what's being taught in your child's school? There is a better way. For over 55 years, Christian Liberty Academy in Arlington Heights has provided families